day, 10 years ago, India was breathing a sigh of relief. Pak regulars who had intruded into Dras, Batalik and Kargil had been beaten back. Coming after the Lahore declaration, there was intense sense of anger towards Pakistan. There was also an intense sense of pride for armed forces. But the Kargil operation is generally associated with the Indian Army. What exactly did the Indian Air Force and the Navy do? Over the next half an hour, we'll try to give you a glimpse of that. In the summer of 1999, when Pakistan took control of the peaks in Kargil and Dras, they perhaps didn't account for this. Or these men and their response. These bombings by the Indian Air Force planes decisively turned the tide in the Kargil battle. But the air warriors did much more than just bomb Pakistani positions, although the Air Force was brought in a little late in the war. When Captain Saurav Kalia and his patrol went missing in the Kashmir sector on May 8th, no one had an inkling about the massive Pakistani intrusion. It took almost a week to launch Operation Vijay to reclaim India's posts. It wasn't easy, as casualties mounted 2 weeks into the operation. The Indian Air Force was pressed into service. Then a wing commander, Air Commodore Sinha, led a fleet of Mi-17 helicopters, each armed with 128 rockets, into the attack on Tololing Peak. The very first strike was devastating.
After the very first attack at the night, the next day they got intercept that from the enemy ki ab hum capture hone wale. And it was such a morale boosting thing for us.
This was just the beginning. The tide had begun to turn. But the going for India was still slow. Pakistani supply lines were intact, and Pakistani army regulars and mujahideens were holding on to peaks, still well entrenched. Soon, Indian pilots made a startling discovery. Montud Hollow was being used as a key supply base by Pakistan.
While flying in that area for a totally different mission, on our targeting pods, we got a fleeting glimpse of a sorted place where there were a lot of huts and a lot of road tracks in the snow. We realized that this was a place that had been filmed a couple of months back in a totally different terrain, where there were just about maybe 5 or 6 huts, and that had been built up into 80 huts by this time. So we realized that it looks like this is a camp where they are storing their ammunition, and it may be something like a base camp for them.
Very next day, another recce mission was launched. Pakistan was about to lose its main supply dump.
We got clearance from the headquarters. Within an hour, all the same 4 pilots were airborne. Now, with 4 single-seat fighters, went there and took that tonnage, and we just obliterated that camp.
Ammunition, stores and ration piled up in winter were destroyed. About 5 Pakistani officers died in the Indian Air Force bombing, along with several men and mujahideens. For the second time, Pakistan had miscalculated India's response. But more was to follow. The iconic Tiger Hill at 16,500 feet had proved to be one of the most difficult peaks for the Indian Army to reclaim. The army was losing too many men trying to reclaim the peak that overlooks the strategic Srinagar-Leh highway. The Air Force came to rescue again. The first strike on Tiger Hill on June 24th was perhaps the most damaging. More Pakistani posts came under the Air Force hammer over the next few days. Pakistan's biggest oil dump at Kukarthang in the Batalik sector was next.
Karsang and all was a day operation. It was carried out by Doc Chaudhary and Apna Chow, who commanded the squadron, and it was a known target, and the bombs were dropped, and the only thing, it so happened to be an oil installation. So I believe immediately after the operation, people went there, it was still black, the oil that was burnt by the bombing of our squadron.
It was mid-June 1999. Pakistan was losing its grip over key peaks. Indian forces were gradually gaining the upper hand.
I think turning point was, first of all, getting, you can't say that, okay, this is the point, at which things turn. But there were several issues. I think Manthodalo, Tiger Hill, Tololing, I think these were, and there were a few others which I may not be able to recall all the names or the points, because some of them are just known by the trig heights. But the turning point was being able to locate where these guys are and then being able to hit them.
But taking down Pakistani posts was only part of the job. Pictures taken from high in the sky provided intelligence about the enemy. Effective intervention by the Indian Air Force kept the Pakistani Air Force out, and it provided ground cover for Indian troops. But the contribution of Indian air warriors in winning the Kargil War went much beyond.
I had to make sure that we had taken all precautions, first of all on the air defense side, and secondly to make sure that should the Pakistan Air Force or the Pakistan military chose to escalate the situation, then we could have given an answer to which they would have no riposte. And this is something that the nation should have realized, because had we not, I don't think Kargil would have remained as contained as it actually was throughout that short operation.
But the going wasn't always easy either. The beginning was far from perfect or harmonious. There were differences between the army and the air force. The army wanted to play down the incursion.
What we had insisted was that the government needs to be brought in the loop. And ab initio I realized that the army was trying to hedge it, and I could understand the reason for it, because I think they were caught off guard. Their own posts had been overtaken.
The face-off at the stage of planning affected air operations.
At the beginning, we were not even sure of what the target was. So we did not know what weapons to load up on our aircraft. Even the day we moved, we were not sure what our target system was. We just moved in a particular configuration, hoping to get a target there.
The Indian Air Force had its own internal problems as well. It had never thought that it would one day have to fight such an unconventional war.
This war was a very unconventional war from Indian Air Force point of view and also from pilots' point of view. It was not a full-fledged war. It was a limited war, restricted to a very, very limited area. And it was not a war against a country as such. And so that's why the training pattern, the way we had thought of a war would have happened, it was not like that.